Well, to unpack all of the late-night goings-on, I'm now joined by Advocate Paul Hoffman from Accountability Now. Let me start with a broad question for you, Advocate Hoffman. Your reaction to the extraordinary, and I describe them as seismic events that happened overnight.
Yes, thank you, Thulasizwe, and good morning to your viewers. I think that it is a good day for the rule of law. It's a good day for the authority of the Constitutional Court, and it is encouraging to see that the police were able to, in spite of all of the dire warnings of another Marikana, to effect the arrest in a reasonably efficient and effective way. The Correctional Services Department is going to have to take into account that Mr. Zuma is due in court on the 19th of this month in relation to the charges arising from his relationship with Schabir Shaik. You'll recall that Schabir Shaik was given 15 years imprisonment for corrupting Mr. Zuma. So the choice of prison is going to have to clearly take into account that he may be required to be at the Pietermaritzburg High Court from Monday to Friday during court hours each day of the week. It may be that the case is postponed for an appeal of some kind after a few days, and that will make a difference to where he is incarcerated. But the period of the incarceration, if we regard civil imprisonment as a normal prison term, which I think it probably is that he will be eligible for administrative release after serving a quarter of the 15 months, which is somewhere between 3 and 4 months of the sentence. So that will also be factored in to where he is detained. I know his family prefers Escort because that's the nearest big prison to Nkandla.
Advocate Hoffman, just from a perspective of the underlying elements of our democracy, what for you stands out? I was making the comment that for me, it was the issue of institutions holding firm, holding the line. The SAPS saying that, that whole old adage that justice shall be dispensed even if the heavens might fall. Those members of the VIP protection unit, for me, them understanding that their role is purely professional, despite having spent so much time around former President Jacob Zuma, who is, make no mistake, a likable man, a man who is charming and who is easy to relate with. And no doubt they have relationships with him built up over a period of time. But for me, I was saying the fact that institutions held is significant. I don't know if you agree with that, and if you have anything other than what I've pointed out that you think is something worth noting about the events of last night.
Yes, I think it is heartening that the institutions have held, and the reason why they have held is because those in the institutions have respected the supremacy of the rule of law and of the Constitution. They've recognized equality before the law, and they have respected the provision of the Constitution that makes court orders binding on those to whom they apply. Now, Mr. Zuma is not one of those. He ought to have handed himself over by midnight on Sunday last week. In fact, he ended up agreeing to go to Escort prison shortly before midnight last night, which was the end of the period that the court had given to the police to track him down and arrest him and take him to a correctional services facility. So he's going to have to explain, when he is trying to throw himself on the mercy of the court, the Constitutional Court next week, why it is that it took him from Sunday to Wednesday to make up his mind to go. I think it must have been clear to him and to everybody else that the application to the KwaZulu-Natal High Court was stillborn when the judge said, I'm concerned that I don't have any jurisdiction to entertain this application. And it's mystifying that a parallel application was not made to the Constitutional Court itself at the time, last Friday, when the rescission application was launched in that court. In fact, Mr. Zuma's legal team only woke up yesterday to ask the Constitutional Court to stay his arrest and detention until after the rescission application. And as far as I know, the last time I looked, the Constitutional Court has not responded to that. So the opportunity of asking the court for a stay has really passed Mr. Zuma by because of the way that he has chosen to conduct this litigation, which is perfectly in line with his well-established Stalingrad strategy.
Right. Advocate Hoffman, may I beg your indulgence and ask you to remain on hold for me? I just want to dispose of an interview with the SAPS's Brigadier Vishnu Naidoo, who has to go into a meeting, but it's important that we get a sense of the timeline of events overnight. Brigadier Vishnu Naidoo, thank you for your time this morning. Just give me a sense of, I suppose, let's start with clarity. There's a narrative that says he has decided, former President Jacob Zuma decided to comply with the order of the Constitutional Court, and I do comply in inverted commas because, as far as I understand, compliance would have meant handing himself over to SAPS before Sunday, by Sunday, which didn't happen. That's the one side. That's the ANC's understanding, for example, that he decided to comply. But the other narrative says he didn't comply. He was secured by your members, albeit, you know, with a sense of talking to him to say these are the only options that you have available. Our members can escort you to a prison. Which one is it? Did he hand himself over, or did you secure him and deliver him to correctional services?
Good day to you, Thulasizwe, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Well, I don't think there's any need to clarify really what happened, because first and foremost, on the 29th of June, the order by the Constitutional Court was very clear that the former President Jacob Zuma had 5 days in which to hand himself over to the police, either at Nkandla Police Station or at Johannesburg Central Police Station. Failing which, the order went further to state that the Minister of Police and the National Commissioner of Police must do everything within 3 days to ensure that he's presented to a correctional facility. I may not be saying it verbatim, but in a nutshell, that's what it said. And when that 5 days lapsed on Sunday midnight, and I stand to be corrected, I think it's Sunday midnight, yes, then it meant that the police thereafter had to then put their plans in place to ensure that the former president was presented to a correctional facility, which we did within the prescribed time.
So you did that within the prescribed time, presenting him to a correctional facility. We were watching closely the goings-on in front of the gate there at the Nkandla home of the former president. We didn't see a significant movement of police driving into the precinct, but we did see a presidential protection unit motorcade, which is afforded to former presidents, driving out just after 11 p.m., almost like 20 past, half past 11 p.m. Just tell me about the involvement of the Presidential Protection Unit, because I think that's an important question in as far as we understand the history of this country. Many will remember a time when there was that politicization of the security forces, with the result that I remember being outside former President Jacob Zuma's home in Forest Town in Johannesburg when there was this standoff between the Scorpions, who wanted to execute search and seizure operations at that home, but his protection unit at the time were adamant that no one was going to gain access there. So I think you understand why I'm asking what role they played in ensuring that he's secured and delivered to the correctional facility.
Well, thank you for that question. I think it's a very important question. It's a narrative that's going around now that it wasn't the police that took him and so forth. I'm watching the social media space. But just to put this matter into perspective, there were various disciplines of police officers involved in the operations in the build-up to Sunday, and then thereafter the planning for taking the former president to custody and then handing him over to the correctional facility. And that entailed public order policing, our tactical response team and visible policing unit and so forth. But also, remember the Presidential Protection Unit and the VIP Protection Unit are South African Police Service members. So the planning also involved them. So the Presidential Protection Unit driving the former president there's nothing sinister about that. There's nothing wrong about that because they are SAPS members, you know, and they formed part of our plans to present the former president to the correctional facility. So there's absolutely nothing wrong or untoward about that.
Vish, lastly, what happens now with that Presidential Protection Unit now that he's been delivered to the correctional facility where he's now, you know, a resident of Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, a tenant of Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamula, and, you know, the entirety, the Commissioner of Correctional Services, Arthur Fraser, and others. What happens to the Presidential Protection Unit?
Well, if you're asking me, Thulasizwe, if the former president would still be receiving protection while incarcerated, the answer, of course, obviously is no. If you're asking me about what's going to happen to those members that were assigned to the team that was protecting the former president, they form a part of a bigger team of Presidential Protection Unit members. They form part of a bigger South African Police Service. So their commander will take a decision as to where they can be redeployed or what can become of them. That information I am not privy to at the moment. Yeah. But of course, those members will still be employed by the South African Police Service. But the question about where they'll be working and what they will be doing will be determined by the need for those members to be placed in particular environments.
Vish, I know I said finally, but I guess let me say ultimately okay. and say parting short. We saw the movement of hardware and software of police in preparation for yesterday's operation and activities. I mean, there were videos on social media of helicopters and, task force members on the ground and multiple vehicles in various towns around that area of Eshowe, Melmoth, Nkandla, Escort, etc. That said to me that you were doing a calculation and an assessment that says there is great risk, because many people were saying all this effort for one person. But I read into that there's a calculation you are making about the risks involved, the public safety risks involved, and security risks involved. With former President Jacob Zuma now in prison, does that risk go away? What can you tell us about to what extent you will remain that vigilant in the wake of this detention having been effected?
Well, thanks, Thulasizwe. Firstly, I just want to clarify something. So I saw those videos about those helicopters. That I'm not even sure where those videos were taken and when they were taken. They were absolutely not part of our operational planning for since last week, Wednesday. As far as our planning was concerned, our planning was before, during, and after the handing over of the former president to the correctional facilities. So and everybody knows and everybody saw the threats that were being made, and we had to plan on that, as well as some of the assessments that we did on our own from intelligence and information, and we had to put measures in place to mitigate the risks associated with those threats that were being made. And of course, we will continue to monitor the situation very closely. As we're speaking now, tomorrow, the Minister of Police, the National Commissioner of Police, will be meeting with that contingent of members that were deployed particularly in northern KwaZulu-Natal to ensure that there's calm and stability in the area. Despite threats being made by certain individuals, we have to say that we must applaud the behavior of the people that were associated with this particular, this particular situation, for the lack of a better word. And, everything went well. I think also the police officers also must be applauded because we exercised maximum restraint when dealing with all of those situations and even preparing for any eventuality. Yeah. And I think everything was done according to the way we planned. And if this situation had to present itself to us again in the manner that it did, I don't think we would change our plans in any way or would make our plans any different to the ones we had for this particular situation.
Vishnu Naidoo, thank you so much. And I do think that you do deserve to be given credit because despite all the threats and all the talk of revolution and uprising, etc., until the point where we are right now, we've not seen any of that. We've not seen loss of life, despite the fact that we had reports that were talking about 100 people that we were told were armed at some point over the past weekend. Vishnu Naidoo speaks on behalf of the National Police Commissioner. Let me go back to you then, Advocate Paul Hoffman. Let me ask you for your legal perspective on what the events of the last 8 or so hours mean for the former president's attempt at staying the execution of the incarceration and detention order. The horse has bolted in a way because his argument in those papers was to say, this will be detrimental to his life, being sent to prison, and also would prejudice him. Even one day in prison will prejudice him. Well, we know now that he will be spending at least one day in prison before the judgment comes tomorrow. What does that mean? What implications does it have for that particular leg of the legal activities?
Yes, as we sit at the moment, judgment is awaited at 11:30 tomorrow, and there is a request to the Constitutional Court itself in relation to staying the arrest and the imprisonment pending the outcome of that application on the 12th. My sense of it is that at 11:30 tomorrow, the KwaZulu-Natal High Court will decline to exercise jurisdiction in the matter, and next week, Monday, the argument on the rescission application will be given short shrift by all of the judges of the Constitutional Court, including those in the minority, and that Mr. Zuma's attempt to have the judgment rescinded on the basis that it was granted in error in his absence will simply not hold water. The effect of that is that he will remain incarcerated until the following Monday, the 19th, when he will be taken to the KwaZulu-Natal High Court to stand trial on those corruption charges arising out of his relationship with Shabir Sheikh. And that trial, where there's an attempt to get Billy Downer, the prosecutor, to recuse himself. I do not believe that recusal application has any merit, and I suspect that the judge will refuse it and will get on with the trial, if not straight away, then within a short period of time. And depending on what the judge says in relation to when he will be ready to rule on the prosecutorial recusal application, the arrangements about the incarceration of Mr. Zuma will be adjusted accordingly.
Lastly, Advocate, there'll be some who will be saying, okay, the 79-year-old man, Jacob Zuma, is being sent to prison. other criminals, including apartheid-era murderers and criminals, have not been dealt with. Do we as a society, and I suppose this is a question that's perhaps more a question one of what legal philosophy, jurisprudence and the likes, are we to then as a society sit back and feel satisfied with ourselves that yes, justice has been done and accountability has been secured, or do we have a lot more to ponder and to probe around those issues, including the broader political context that made it possible to have a person such as former President Jacob Zuma at the head of the state?
Yes, certainly there has to be something wrong with an electoral system that allows a person of his lack of integrity and lack of moral fiber to be elected not once but twice. But to answer your broader question as succinctly as I can, it's important to recognize that under our Bill of Rights, everybody is equal before the law, and everybody is entitled, if they are accused of a crime, to a fair trial. And fair trial rights include the right to be brought to trial within a reasonable time. Now, whether the excesses of Quattro and other ANC camps and the excesses of the security police and others working for the apartheid regime is fair game for hearing at this stage is a matter which the Constitutional Court is going to decide, I think, in the Rodriguez matter arising out of the death in detention of Ahmed Timol in 1971. So it remains to be seen whether the delays on that front are regarded as incompatible with a fair trial in 2021. But certainly the lesson for South Africa as far as power relations in the new South Africa are concerned is that the president and the ex-president cannot regard themselves as above the law. The Constitution requires that their conduct be consistent with the Constitution, and consequences do follow. Accountability is exacted, and those responsible are obliged to then answer to the courts and to the law for their failures to comply with the Constitution.
Advocate Paul Hoffman, thank you so much for your time. He is from Accountability Now, weighing in on what has happened, the extraordinary events of the last 8 or so hours in fact, it's more than 8 hours now. Where am I? It's now, yeah, it's well and truly over 8 hours. It's almost actually 12 hours since the events started gaining traction and momentum last night with the former president being taken to a prison in escort. At the